I'm Karen Broadhead, and I have the honor today of introducing you to some amazing people that I have a lot of respect and admiration for and have the opportunity to work with. So I just want to honor you for being here today and for believing in healing and fighting against such a great cause. I'm going to introduce these 5 millennials. They're amazing in the order that they'll be speaking to you. And so since they aren't all up here for you to see, I'm going to ask them to stand up when I introduce them so you can see who I'm talking about. And I'll do it in the order that they'll come up. So Nina Lawson. Yay! Awesome. All right, Nina. Nina is currently living in St. George, Utah, spending her days working for the Diamond Heart Foundation and exploring the red landscape of southern Utah. She is an advocate for those who have been impacted harmfully by sexual exploitation and hopes to bring more unity to the movement of opposition. Savannah Cuthbertson. So this is Savannah Cuthbertson. She currently resides in St. George, Utah, and is currently finishing her bachelor's degree in psychology and writing at the University of Utah, and spends as much time climbing rocks as she can. She is passionate about seeing a healthier and safer world for women and children. She has worked with victims of sexual exploitation and human trafficking and wants to help put an end to it. Cassie Hulse. Cassie is an advocate for women in recovery from sexual addiction, specifically pornography addiction. She is involved with several organizations dedicated to fighting dedicated to fighting the plague of pornography and human trafficking, including Reach 10. She shares her personal journey of pornography addiction on her blog. The title of her blog is battletogether.com. Her mission is to give a voice to women who feel that they cannot speak openly about their addiction, and to dispel the taboo surrounding pornography addiction. She is from Hermiston, Oregon, and is currently attending BYU as a linguist and English language major. She enjoys hiking, singing, and playing the guitar. Zachary Andrews. Zachary is 23 years old and studies psychology at BYU. He is from Henderson, Nevada, and currently works as a Korean teacher at the Provo LDS Missionary Training Center. He has been married to his beautiful wife, Rachel, for almost 2 years. They serve together as officers in the organization Reach 10. Zachary enjoys reading, writing, playing ultimate frisbee, and sharing his story of recovery from compulsive pornography use. And finally, Craig Smith. Okay. Craig grew up on a small farm in southern Wisconsin, where he learned an appreciation for the outdoors and the importance of family unity. After spending 2 years serving as a missionary in the Philippines, he began studying at Brigham Young University and will soon graduate with a degree in interdisciplinary humanities. He sees the social dilemmas created by pornography as the greatest threats to people finding true joy, freedom, and connection in their lives, and is determined to help facilitate the necessary changes to make a real difference. Craig currently serves as an officer at Reach 10. So I'll turn the time over to Nina.
I have to have someone turn on the computer for me, which may come as a shock considering I'm a millennial. So Savannah and I will be speaking first, and we kind of bounced off of each other, but we're talking about the harms of our over-sexualized millennial culture in the US and abroad. So typically, when people think of millennial culture, we like to make a lot of jokes about our well-groomed beards, not me, but some in the crowd. New tech, which I am also not familiar with most of the time. So maybe and the Instagram food, right? Everybody identifies with that? No? Okay. But that was just a joke slide. I wanted to talk with you guys about how millennials are contributing to the over-sexualized United States. So millennials aged 18 to 35 make up over 60% of Pornhub alone's usership. That's one porn site. According to their 2016 year in review, they're actually very proud of that. So the more you know. Among the top 5 search terms on Pornhub in this age category were lesbian, stepmom, MILF. If you want to know what that means, ask me later. Stepsister, and teen. Half of the most purchased porn contains verbal aggression, and 88% contains physical aggression towards women. 9 out of 10 rapists admit to using pornography on a regular basis. Overuse of pornography is leading to frequent cases of erectile dysfunction in men, and one study of 854 women in 9 countries found that 49% of women said that porn had been made of them while they were in prostitution. 47% said they had been harmed by the men who had either forced or tried to force their victims to do the things men had seen in porn. Obviously, this isn't just men watching porn. I would never, these are just the overarching statistics. Ladies are watching porn too, and I know it. So I just want to dissect this a little further. All of these statistics are kind of random, but they all are engaged with how millennials are interacting with our over-sexualized, pornified culture. It all relates back to them. Some things I noticed in this are millennials are finding it much harder to commit or engage in relationships. Like, people aren't really dating anymore. It's so easy to just get on Tinder or Grindr. Is that a thing? I don't know. I don't even know. But it's a dangerous world for millennials out there. They are just getting on these social media sites, and it's an immediate casual hookup, which is also leading to STDs being on the rise. And that is not good. Millennials are supposed to be the generation that equalizes gender, but we teach objectification of women and LGBTQ women. In those top 5 related search terms, people play it off like it's no big deal to just go search for lesbian or stepmom or teen sex, but I cringe at the thought of this, you know? Like, it makes my insides just churn thinking that somebody thinks that that's a real loving relationship between 2 committed women, or like that's how it is, or it's okay to have sex with teenagers when you're an older person, even just watching that, you know? And I think that just is setting us up for some really dangerous ground. It's teaching us that it's okay to objectify people in these categories, and I really think it affects us more than we give credit for. Millennials are directly influencing human trafficking. I cannot stress enough how much pornography influences the world of human trafficking. If you don't know much about it, please ask us questions when this whole thing is done. I'm sure these guys are well informed on the world of it too. They just go hand in hand. The more that you continue to click and watch on these porn sites, it's progressing the assault and abuse of the women and children in those porn videos. Because I would say it is so easy to make pornography these days that most of what we're seeing out there is not legal or consensual. We're learning about sex via internet pornography, which is overwhelmingly degrading and abusive in content. I don't know how frequent it is to have the sex talk anymore. I didn't get it. I think overall parents are kind of just relying on schools and the internet to educate their children, and this is so dangerous because you have no control or no idea over what your children are seeing online. And I promise you, it is degrading and dehumanizing and disgusting, and they're gonna learn things that you would never even wanna know yourself. So, you know, it's awful. Please talk to your children about sex. Please talk to your millennial children about sex, even if they're 36 years old. Just check in with them, because it's a dangerous and scary world out there, and sometimes I think it feels really lonely because just people aren't talking about this. Their real sex lives and relationships are struggling. So the more that people are engaging with and watching pornography, the more that that's just comfortable for them. It's easier than accessing the world of a relationship, because that comes with, as I'm sure all of you know, many complexities that are totally worth it. But we're starting to devalue that, and these guys are going to touch on more of that later. They're viewing porn that says sex with step-siblings, stepmoms, and teenagers are okay. I know I already stressed this a little bit, but that is so wrong. And I just can't imagine sexualizing someone who's supposed to be family or whatever. And I have a background in wilderness therapy, and in that therapeutic program, it was engaging with kids who had sexual compulsions and addictions, sexual behavioral problems, all this stuff, and they were having sex with their siblings. They were molesting their siblings, they were molesting their neighbors, they were just all over the place, and they learned how to do that from pornography. I'd say 10 out of 10 times. I don't actually think I can think of a child that I met who hadn't had some harm done to them or saw pornography and acted out on that. It's harsh. So all of this is kind of heavy. I'm hoping Reach 10 will bring the light for you a little more today. I brought it down, I'm sorry. But what do we do now? The biggest thing I can say is we need to address and talk about the issues that we're facing. I work for a nonprofit called the Diamond Heart Foundation, as stated earlier, and our whole thing is just we're seeking to unify the movement of opposition. And I'm really passionate about unity. I think if all of us come together and work together, we can make a larger movement, a larger voice, and maybe we can get a conversation started. Because it's uncomfortable to stand in front of all of you today and talk about such a vulnerable issue, as I'm sure many of you have faced. It's hard to talk about sex, porn, drugs, and rock and roll, right? I'm adding porn in now. We need to address the connections between porn use, human trafficking, and sexual violence. The evidence is there. It's a reality that so many of the women in the sex trafficking industry face. They don't have any consent in their life, and so it's easy for these films to be made of them. And every time someone clicks and watches that film, that woman is abused all over again. Like, she didn't ask for that, they didn't ask for that, whoever it was. I just have a big heart for that, so I hope you guys will research a little more and learn. Reach 10 is also going to connect on this point a little more, but we need to find value in real connection again. The millennial generation is lonely. They are depressed. They are sad. They are aching and yearning for something. And I know that that comes with every generation, but I hear it from my peers more than anybody, that they just feel lost and confused and alone in this world, especially when it's such an awkward and uncomfortable topic to even say, I struggle with pornography, or I struggle with sex addiction, or whatever. And an overwhelming number of them, I would say a rough estimate is all of them, struggle with loneliness and have found themselves into a situation where they feel hurt by the world of sex, porn, whatever. Like, somebody along the line is getting hurt by these, and it's really devaluing their life. I can't think of the word. Their happiness in life. They're not able to find that as much when we live in such a overwhelmingly degrading culture. So the big thing I want to stress again is unity. We need to unify in this movement. I hope that all of you will talk to us afterwards when we open it up for questions, and join us in our combat for a better, healthier, sex-positive culture. And I'm going to pass it off to Savannah.
To attach this again. Yeah. Also not good with tech. Also a millennial. So I'm going to kind of take this discussion and bring it to a more global scale. For me, I grew up overseas for my whole life. My parents both worked for the State Department, and from the age of 10 to 18, I was living in Kenya, then Italy, and then Panama. So with what I'm going to be talking about, it will be kind of more related to my experiences overseas. So when I lived in Kenya, I would be walking down the street, driving with my parents, and I would see kids the same age as me, 10 years old, 11 years old, playing on the streets and also begging on the streets. And I remember volunteering at orphanages. My mom worked at a bunch of orphanages, and I would play with the kids, my peers. We'd have fun. And it really saddens me to know that now I'm speaking here on this stage, and the majority of them have grown up in the sex industry at some point, in the sex slavery, and while I'm standing here speaking to you, they have no voice. People that I played with. There are 153 million orphaned and therefore vulnerable children worldwide. And it makes an easy target for traffickers because orphans don't have any family to look for them or notice that they're gone. So they're targeted a lot. And in some cases, even the orphanages they're in will work with the slave industry, the sex slave industry, to give children to them. A quarter of the international sex trade is made up of children. When I lived in Italy, I was 13 to 15, and my family and I would travel to different military bases. There are a lot in Italy. And I remember a few instances, but one in particular where there was a couch right outside the military base I had just been in, and there was a prostitute standing there. And I didn't really understand what was going on at the time. It was kind of a common sight to see prostitutes around Italy, where I grew up. And now, looking back, I realize how common it is, because there have been many statistics on how prevalent the sex industry is and the sex trade is around military bases. According to John Miller, who was a former anti-trafficking ambassador, human trafficking, especially of women and girls forced into prostitution, have followed demand where a multitude of U.S. and foreign aid workers, humanitarian workers, civil contractors, and uniformed personnel operate. And there's a spike around foreign workers from Western countries in the demand of the sex industry, and it includes the U.S. It's our people too. In Panama, I remember going out with friends and having a brothel pointed out to me across the street from a Hooters in a really well-traveled part of the city. Everyone went there, and it's really sad because it was common, for people to go to the Hooters and then go across the street to get a prostitute. And this is really important because Panama is now a tourist hotspot. It's booming. And with that boom, the sex trafficking and the sex tourism industry is also having a boom because of sex tourism. People who travel overseas to usually developing nations to have sex with prostitutes or minors illegally. And it's easy because there are not as many regulations. It's harder to get caught. It's fairly common. And it's happening with Western nations. With these three instances that I've told you of the places I lived, there is one similarity, and that is the United States. The US has a huge impact on the global sex industry, bigger than anyone can really imagine, and millennials make up a huge part of that demand. In Panama, with the tourist boom and the illegal sex industry, it goes hand in hand. And tourists from our countries are traveling there to have sex with the people who have no voice in those countries, who are often trafficked there from other countries. And that includes people from the United States. In Italy, it's well known that there is a spike in sex work and therefore the illegal sex trade around military bases. And it's important to recognize our country's part in this sex trade, and especially my generation's part. The majority of active duty military personnel are between the ages of 22 and 30. And the same with many foreign aid workers as well. As millennials, this is now our issue. We are part of this demand. And the orphans and the children from Kenya and everywhere that I saw that are my age right now are being kidnapped to fuel a demand that we have. We have this demand, our culture, Western culture, the United States culture. And while I would like to say that our generation is overcoming this trend or fighting this trend, that would be a lie, because the global sex trafficking industry is thriving and the amount of sex trafficked women and children is growing. And it just makes you wonder, is it our over-sexualized culture that spurs this demand? And how can we expect anything to change if millennials grew up in a world that sexualizes and objectifies women, where pornography teaches us that it's okay to have sex for money because the women and children aren't people and they can be degraded? But it's more than just foreign travelers. That's just a very easy way to show our effect. But in reality, as stated by Nina earlier, 49% of women in a study of 854 said that pornography had been made of them while in prostitution. Many of whom were not, most of whom are not consensually there. They're trafficked. So by watching illegal pornography, people support the sex trade. Every time a video is clicked on that was filmed of a woman or a child against their will, we're continuing their cycle of abuse. We need to assess our impact on these women and children who are real people, and this is affecting real people. It's not just a screen that you're looking at. We need to accept our role in this industry in order to make change, and we need to accept and unite together against the degradation of people systematically all over the globe. They're real people. Sorry, that was really dark. I got really emotional.
I'm going to bring it back from the global perspective and share a single perspective, my story. I was 11 years old, and I was coming home from school, cutting through a familiar neighborhood park, when out of nowhere a man appeared next to me. This man had a lit cigarette, and he shoved it in my mouth. And he held it there, I choked on the fumes, he taught me how to use it. And soon I started to crave the cigarette. And lucky for me, he had a free, never-ending supply. That story sounds really bizarre. But replace cigarette with pornography, and that's exactly what happened to me, and what's been happening to children for decades now. I never wanted to be addicted to pornography. In fact, when I first saw it, I had no idea what it was. All I knew was that I was in a safe place, my home, and the images on the screen were scary and confusing, but they were also exciting and intriguing. I didn't understand these feelings, and I often returned to pornography out of curiosity, but then I started going to pornography anytime I felt anxious or scared or stressed. It became an escape. It became a drug. It was the way I coped with life, and by the time I entered my teenage years, I was addicted to pornography. I felt completely helpless. The topic of sex was rarely ever discussed in any settings, whether it was at home, school, or church. I was taught that sex was only to be between a man and a woman within the bonds of matrimony, and anything outside of those parameters was bad. I was taught that pornography was dangerous and addictive, but only because they happened to be addressing the men who were in the same room as me. I was taught that I needed to dress modestly, that it was my responsibility to do so that the boys around me wouldn't have vile thoughts towards my body. As a young heterosexual girl addicted to lesbian pornography and lost deep in my own isolating battle with struggling to keep pure thoughts, I felt like a total freak. And I felt like I had nowhere to turn. Growing up, I heard from many adults who were trying to help, but didn't have a clue how to help, and who had no idea that the world was changing and that both boys and girls were susceptible to the trap of pornography. Innocent but isolating conversations were a dime a dozen. Adult, I know you're a good girl, and you don't watch pornography, but we should talk about it. Me. I am watching pornography, and I can't seem to stop, but I can't tell you about it because I don't want you to think I'm a bad person. Adult, in that same conversation, don't ever date a guy with a pornography addiction or who has watched pornography. Me. Are boys being told the same thing? Will I never be able to date someone or be married because of my addiction? Adult. Men shouldn't watch pornography. Me. I am a woman. Women aren't supposed to struggle with pornography addiction. If I ever told anyone, they would think I was a freak. My parents, teachers, they all did the best they knew how with what little information they had, and I don't blame them at all for the isolation that I felt during that time in my life. But these scenarios are perfect examples of why we need to work fiercely and quickly to dispel this toxic culture of shame and isolation and change it into something that is uplifting and healing. The story that I told myself over and over again was that I was the only one. And this message was innocently and naively reinforced to me by the adults in my life. I believed that I really was the only girl trapped in pornography addiction, and it was my job to get myself out of that trap. But something inside of me told me that that wasn't true. And so I decided to write a blog post about my addiction. And within hours of being published, this post received thousands of views. I started receiving hundreds of messages from both men and women, but mostly women, saying, "Thank you for giving me a voice. I struggle too." This reaching out and finding connection, this mutual vulnerability, the love that I received is ultimately what brought me out of this deep shame and isolation that I had been feeling for years. And it brought me into lasting recovery, which is where I am today. If there's one thing we can do to help those who are drowning in fear and isolation, it's to change the conversation from men struggle with pornography addiction and they need to get over it and learn how to control themselves, to men and women struggle with pornography addiction and we need to help each other. Connection, love, acceptance, empathy are all vital in combating addiction and the toxic culture surrounding the conversation of pornography. Whether you're talking about pornography in general conversation or someone takes the scariest leap of faith and confides in you about their personal struggle, there are two things that you can do to help them and to help change the toxic culture into something healthy and healing and positive. First, make an effort to intentionally include women in the conversation. Women are just as susceptible to pornography addiction as men are. And according to a recent study featured by Fight the New Drug, statistics are showing that young women today are watching just as much pornography as men are. If we want to offer a place for healing, we have to make a conscious effort to include women in the conversation. Finally, the most important thing you can do is offer love, offer compassion. The simplest words like "me too" and "I love you" will change someone's life. The simple words alone can bring someone out of shame and isolation that they've probably been feeling for years, whether they're a man or a woman. You have the power to express love and connection in the moments that matter most. And that is a difference that every single one of you is capable of making. Thank you.
Wow. That's all I have to say is wow. Like really, wow. Cassie, you're awesome. That's really true. I want to continue on with this a little bit more. I don't have any slides. I'm being selfish. I want you to pay attention to me a little bit. But I want to continue on with this conversation, and I want to share my story a little bit too. But I feel like I was racking my brain, like what is my focus? What am I really, truly thinking about and really want to get across? And I have a title for my little speech that I'm going to give, and I entitled it, "Be Vulnerable, Not Skeptical." But I want to add a little bit more to that. I want to focus on the home. I want to focus on the people that are closest to you. Because we can stand up in these conferences, and we can stand up across the world and say, fine, and we should do that, But the place where this starts is with the people closest to you. So, I'm going to share my story right now about my exposure to pornography, and I also want you to take just a moment and actually compare it to Cassie's a little bit, because in a lot of ways, it's really similar. But in a lot of ways, my story is unique. And so pay attention to those things, because the way in which men and women are affected by pornography are similar. Because we all are affected by it. I was also 11 years old when I was first exposed to pornography. My family just moved to a new state. I moved from Arizona to Nevada, to the Las Vegas area in Henderson, Nevada. It was 2 weeks before school started, and so I'm heading into middle school, still with the mentality of an elementary school student, and I had no friends, none at all. And going in, I had like a polo shirt on, tucked in, whatever, glasses, hair stuck straight up, and honestly, I was a grade A nerd. And so that made me a target for bullying. And I was bullied, emotionally and physically, probably not to the extent that a lot of kids are today. I will not say that I am above a lot of those kids, but I was bullied. And I sought refuge from that bullying. And I remember one day, my parents were out, and I was home babysitting my sisters, and I decided to explore a new website. Some of you may know it as YouTube. Back then it was relatively new. And so in the midst of entertaining myself with cat videos and, how to be a ninja tutorials, I found things. I saw images and videos of things that perked my interest, made me feel different. And these pornographic images made me forget about all those things, those bullies, those things in my life. And I would come back time and time again when the day was hard, or when I felt like, even just the times that I was bored. And eventually it was just any time that my parents were out of the house, I just sought for this stimulation. And I didn't really know at the time, but it would be something that would consume me and cause me to be somebody that I really wasn't inside. To fuel my addiction, I truly became a liar, a thief at times, and a manipulator, because I had to hide it from other people. I didn't want other people to know, because I grew up just like, yes, you did, in a culture that told me that is bad, that is wrong, the people that do that are bad people. And so once I figured out what I was viewing was wrong, I was like, I gotta hide this from everybody. And so I suffered by myself, became somebody that I never wanted to be. Now I want you to take just a moment, and I want you to think to yourself, what is the one thing I don't want anybody in my life to ever know about me? And imagine coming up here and telling it to everybody, even on camera. That's how I feel right now. I am visibly shaking a little bit because I am nervous. And it's not easy, especially when my wife is here in this room. It's not the first time that she's heard this. In fact, she is the rock in my life. She is the one that I turn to when I need help. And I need help sometimes. I'll get back to that story in a little bit, but I said that my title was Be Vulnerable, Not Skeptical. Now, what does that mean? So, first, I want to talk about being skeptical. We have this idea of, yes, pornography is bad. It is not good for us as a culture. It's not good for us as a society. It leads to trafficking, child abuse, and all these sort of problems. And we have this idea, yes, it is negative. We should be angry and frustrated. We do have a right to be doing that. But it causes this culture that we have to be negative about everything, to be skeptical. To be skeptical is to be not thoroughly convinced. Synonyms of the word being pessimistic and distrusting. And when we are skeptical towards each other about this problem, then we can't really create connection. I had somebody that came up to me once, a friend, that said, I'm so glad that my husband does not struggle with pornography. This person didn't know about my struggles at all. I'm so glad my husband doesn't struggle with pornography because I don't think I could ever handle that. And my thought process is, note to self, never talk to this person about my struggles with pornography. Don't do it because they're not open to that. Being skeptical means we're not open to the idea that other people may struggle, especially the ones that are closest to us. Parents understand that pornography use is on the rise, but it's in someone else's home. It's the delinquent down the street. It's not my children. My child is not like that. We have filters on our computer. I'm going to tell you right now, filters can be worked around. That's part of the person that I did not like being, that manipulator. Being skeptical, this idea of not my child, pushes people into isolation. It pushed me into isolation. We can't have that. We really can't have that. So be vulnerable, not skeptical. What does it mean to be vulnerable? Being vulnerable is being open with one's thoughts, attitudes, and feelings, one to another. That means we're also open to the thoughts, feelings, and attitudes of other people. That means we might get hurt. We might be offended by what somebody says. We might be. No girlfriend or boyfriend, husband or wife wants to ever know that their significant other is struggling with pornography. Nobody wants to know that. But when we become oblivious to it, when we put up these walls and we say, nope, then it will hurt that much more when it comes out later. Just that much more. Now, I'm not saying that every single person uses pornography. Not at all. But when we consider some statistics, in the book, The Porn Phenomenon, these are where I got these statistics from, said that 23% of all Americans use pornography at least monthly. That means I can pull 4 people in this room right up on the stage, and I have a 1 in 4 chance of picking who it is. It's me, but... And then if we wanted to make our odds better, we could take 3 teenagers and put them up here, because 37% of all teens use pornography at least monthly. 1 in 3. Or, even better, we can take any young adult aged 18 to 24, just 2 of them up here. Flip a coin. Even flipping a coin wouldn't be as, because 57% of young adults use pornography at least monthly. I got that from the Porn Phenomenon book, the study by the Barna Foundation. So, how do we become vulnerable? I'm going to tell you a story. And this is going to put my wife up on a pedestal because she is the greatest person I've ever met. It was about 2 months before we were to be married. And I told myself, I have to talk to her about it. I have to. There is no way that I can't. I'm going to make a religious comment, so I apologize for anybody that didn't want to hear anything. But I am a religious person, and so I knelt down and I said, God, I need help to be able to know when to talk to her about it because I am terrified that she is going to reject me. I am terrified that she is going to hate me. Think I'm a disgusting person, because honestly, I think that about myself. And I got up and I said, okay, when it presents itself, I'm going to take advantage of it. 2 days later, we just got off of a date at a nice fancy restaurant. Just kidding. We don't have any money, so it's a burger joint. And we got into the car, and as we're going out, she turns to me and she says, I have a random question. Have you ever struggled with pornography? That's what I'm saying. This lady up here said, thanks, God. And I was like, that's what I was saying. I literally did say that afterwards. And I said, this is my moment. And so I opened up. And I said, yes. And tears immediately streaming down my face. I was like, I don't want to do this. And so I'm talking to her. And she listened. And I expressed everything that I wanted to tell her about. And I said, I wanted to talk to you about this. And I'm grateful that you were able to ask me this because now I feel like I can. And so we talked. I talked. She listened. And she listened. She would occasionally ask a question, but she listened to me. Didn't give anything, didn't give any advice, nothing like that. She just listened to me. After I was done, she expressed her thoughts and her feelings. And what did she tell me? She told me that she loved me. She told me that she had never loved me more than right then because I was willing to be open. She thanked me for being vulnerable, thanked me that I had the courage to actually talk to her about it, and that I was actually thinking of her, that I didn't want her to find out later. And then she asked, what can I do to help? She didn't try to fix me right there. She just asked, what can I do to help? And at that night, we started a plan. We started something very simple. We didn't know what we were doing, honestly. 21 years old. I'm only 23, but we didn't really know what we were doing, but we worked together to create a plan. That plan has been adjusted over time as needs and different situations have come up, and we still adjust to this day. I'm not perfect. My wife is not perfect, though she's very close. And our conversation that night was not perfect, but we did some things that were right. We did some things that are needed nowadays. Number one, first off, that wasn't the first deep conversation we ever had. We had built a culture in between us of mutual understanding, of love and vulnerability, that we could talk to each other about things, and that's what we need, to be able to create something with somebody instead of jumping down their throat. Number two, we listened to each other. Stephen R. Covey once said, and I think you want to botch this quote, but he said that we, as a people, usually listen to reply with the intent to reply, not with the intent to understand. And we need to listen with the intent to understand each other. And number three, she didn't try to fix me, but she worked together with me. Now, I've been able to reach out to other people with this same attitude. I've been able to reach out even to my family with this same attitude, and I can tell you it's been working a lot. And I hope and I pray that these things will come and hit your heart and help you to decide to look for those that are closest to you that may be struggling, and be open to that idea that those that are closest to us may be struggling, because honestly, statistically speaking, it's very possible. Thank you very much.
I think I want to say thank you to everyone who's presented today, and thank you for your vulnerability, Zach and Cassie. And thank you for being here. Thank you for caring about this. This means a lot to us that you're here and that you care. So I want to start off by telling you a quick story. About a year ago, I was student teaching at a high school in Utah County, so a little south of here. And I put out a question jar for my students who wanted to ask me things anonymously. Most of the questions were rather comical, actually. I think my favorite was, why aren't you married yet, you old man? And as enjoyable as reading those questions was, one day a student slipped something into the jar that was a little more serious. The paper read, will you teach us how to deal with addiction? When I read that, my heart was breaking automatically, right, for this young student. And I wanted to help him. At least judging by the handwriting, I assumed him to be male. But as I thought about it, I was in a bit of a conundrum because I knew I couldn't spend an entire class period talking about addiction, and the topic inherently demands that, right? And something interesting happened. I actually found myself avoiding the topic completely. Not out of a lack of moral courage, but because I was feeling a little bit helpless and a little bit hopeless. The task just seemed too daunting and my credentials much too limited, right? And as I think of you today, I am certain that some of you have experienced similar things. Some of you might be listening to the messages today and thinking of things that you could have and maybe should have done better, and might be feeling some regret. Some of you, when you think about the task that lies before all of us, and you think about everything that has to be done to create meaningful change in the future, you might be a little overwhelmed, like I was. And this can be damaging, because I fear that some of us might turn away from fully engaging in this issue. And that's understandable. I experienced that. With all of that said, I believe that in order for us to move forward, we must change the way we think and feel about this issue. For a few minutes, let me open your mind to the possibility of shifting your view of the issue of pornography, and you can insert addiction there, from something of this massive problem that we have to deal with to that of an opportunity that we get to engage in. Ladies and gentlemen, I believe that we not only have the chance to fix things, fix what has gone wrong, we have the opportunity to make things better than it ever was before. To highlight how this paradigm shift is possible, consider for a moment Wayne Dyer's comments, and I'm going to have you pull it up. Just one more, actually. He said that if you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. And he's talking about how we look at problems in specific. If you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. Now, what does he mean by that? He actually uses, to explain himself, he uses Albert Einstein, of all people to simplify things, right? But Einstein said, I think the most important question facing humanity is the universe a friendly place? And then he went on to explain that we all must decide whether the world around us is friendly or hostile. For that will change everything that we do moving forward, the research we embark on and the technologies we build. Well, similarly, I believe that in order to move forward, we must decide whether the issue of pornography is just something that we have to deal with again, or if we can use it as a catalyst to unravel the deeper issues at play. Can we use this destructive drug to our advantage? I believe that we can, because I believe that we can change the way we look at this so that the thing we're looking at will change. Allow me to share 3 things that each of us will have the opportunity to engage in as we work together to create a brighter future. Opportunity number 1, we now have the chance to collectively learn how to respond to negative emotions in healthy and positive ways. Something that generations before us have largely failed to do. Looking for something to distract ourselves from the difficulties of life is not something new, right? I think we all know that. Our history is full of examples of pacifiers or escapes. And this includes, and you know, alcohol, drugs, sex. And in a lot of ways, pornography is just another add-on to that list. But what we are now learning is how to lean into the discomfort that life creates. We're learning how to reach out and get help instead of running away from our problems. Yours is the opportunity to help those around you do the same thing. Yours is the opportunity to help them find greater fulfillment and meaning in their lives as they embrace life in its totality. Opportunity number 2. We can help those around us break free from the bonds of isolation and help them develop relationships of safety, trust, and love. I believe that we've entered a time in human history where we must learn how to develop these kinds of relationships, the kind of relationship that allows us to work together to overcome our weaknesses. It's time for us to do away with a culture that only wants to see our good side, but shuns those who expose their vulnerabilities and weaknesses. No, I'm not saying that we should be flaunting those things publicly. But what I am saying mirrors the remarks that you've heard today, that we need to develop the kinds of relationships that allow a space for mutual collaboration as we confront the difficult situations that we're all going to engage in, right? Now, this is not limited to our experiences with pornography and sexuality, but it most certainly includes them. Helping others create a space where this is possible will bring greater fulfillment and meaning into their lives. And opportunity number 3, and I truly believe this is a historical chance for each of us. I believe that we can help the future generation find deeper fulfillment and love in their life as they learn the importance of a healthy sexual relationship. Now, all of us know that in order to do this, we must first learn what that looks like in our own lives, right? And we must understand the importance of sex and identify it as a vital aspect of our existence. If we can do this, we can help the rising generation break free from the isolation that shame creates. Future generations, my friends, must be able to openly talk about their encounters with their own sexuality. We must help them find a space where we can help them through that crucial point in their lives, a space where we can educate them before the porn industry does. Now, with all this said, it is a historic opportunity for all of us, and it's exciting, right? But I've heard people say that I wish, quote unquote, I wish that things could go back to the way it was before our society was infiltrated by pornography. And I understand that sentiment, but I'm not one of them. I don't want to go back, because that culture doesn't work. It never worked. It failed us, right? Pornography is forcing us to rethink and reconstruct our basic assumptions of what a relationship should look like. It's forcing us to change the way we look at things so that the things we look at change. Ladies and gentlemen, I refuse to settle for a world that perpetuates the cycle of shame, a world that has historically not allowed ourselves to be seen. It's time for us to use pornography, and you can insert addiction there, as a catalyst to help people discover their humanity and find deeper and more meaningful connection in their lives. Because everyone is worthy of human connection. Everyone has the right to let themselves be seen and still be loved, not in spite of, but because of their weaknesses. I ask you to engage in this movement wholeheartedly and to take those in your life and empower them, because this is our world. This is our future, ladies and gentlemen, a future that I think is worth fighting for. And I ask each of you not to settle for anything less. Out of the years of ashes of life that pornography has destroyed will arise men and women who are bold and daring and willing to say enough's enough. Speaking of millennials in particular, my executive director, Savannah Davis, said that millennials who were ambushed by pornography are now becoming champions of healthy sexuality. Millennials who for a long time have this negative stigma around them, right, as being this fallen generation, and now I include myself here, we are now breaking free from our mistakes. We're starting to stand up and say no to a culture that failed us. A lot of us had to discover on our own the destructive nature of sexual addictions, and far too many had to do it alone. Now, I don't know what it's like to deal with addiction like the stories you've heard today, but I know enough to know that nobody should ever have to face this alone again. And I ask you to take the millennials in your life, to empower them, to take them by the hand and say, let's fix this together. Now, in closing, I want you to pretend with me that you're in a sailboat, right? And you're on an ocean, and there's a large wave coming at you. What's going to happen if at the last moment, out of fear, you turn sideways? Inevitably, you're going to capsize. In like manner, I worry that if in this the last moment we turn away out of fear or hopelessness, the same thing will happen to us. I did find ways to address addiction in my classroom a year ago, but it took a lot of vulnerability and humility on my part to create an environment for that to happen. And I found hope and courage in an unlikely place. I stopped seeing it as this task that I had to deal with, right? And I started seeing this as a blessed opportunity that had been given me. The result was a multitude of thank yous and letters from students who I came to love wholeheartedly. Ladies and gentlemen, if you will have the mental fortitude to change the way you're looking at this, the thing you're looking at will change. Thank you.
Apparently now we're supposed to take questions, if anybody has any questions. We got a question right here. Okay. Would you like to describe your...
Great, go for it.
I'm not sure I'm completely qualified to talk about Diamond Heart, but I can tell you what Reach 10 does. The idea of Reach 10 is to, I think there's a lot of us with microphones on right now. The idea of Reach 10 is to take millennials in particular, the younger generation, and to train them to go out and reach out in their communities and in their cultures to make positive change, right? And so that's the foundation. We believe that everyone's worthy of human connection, and that's the opposite of addiction. And so taking these people who are inherently, because of their experiences, our experiences, motivated to make this change happen, that's what Reach 10 does. And so I'll allow you guys to talk about Diamond Heart, and we don't have much collaboration between us, but maybe we should.
The Diamond Heart Foundation is, hold on. We are seeking more unity in the movement of opposition to sexual exploitation in all of its forms, including pornography, human trafficking, anything you could think of that would umbrella under that. We're working on making this symbol kind of a very well-recognized symbol that stands against exploitation in people's minds. So when you see the pink ribbon, you think breast cancer, you know, we want that same type of association. So it's easy for people to stay where they stand on these issues. You can put a sticker in your car or wear a shirt or whatever you're comfortable with and just ease into those conversations. And hopefully we can find connection amongst other entities and organizations and individuals who also want to take a stand against exploitation. Yeah. Yeah. Do you want me to just...
Go ahead, just keep going.
We'll just rotate. I started with the Diamond Heart Foundation about a year ago, and I had just come out of wilderness therapy, as I mentioned, with youth who dealt with sexual exploitation and issues surrounding it. And I was looking for something. Really, I was looking for any job, but this one came up online somewhere. Honestly, I just found a posting for it, and it was in St. George, and I applied and got the job. It was really just this weird, perfect happenstance of falling into place. But I've been invested in anti-exploitation organizations since I was like 19. So I just continue that cycle of trying to fight the man, you know, whoever the man is.
Is it all? Oh, hi. I don't officially work for the Diamond Heart Foundation. I worked with Nina in wilderness therapy, and we're partners. And so she helped me get into it, and I just help her out and support the cause. So, yeah.
For time reasons, Zach, maybe could you just summarize kind of how we all got involved in?
I don't know how everybody got involved, but...
Okay, never mind.
Just as an example, I got involved by listening to our executive, Vanna Davis, at BYU. She gave a presentation about human connection and battling this pornography through human connection. And I came up to her afterwards and I said, that is my life story. How can I get involved? And I feel that is very similar to those kind of things that we found that we were very passionate about what we heard, and we said, how can we get involved? And there's opportunities to be able to do that. How can we get involved? We will let you know, that kind of thing.
So if you go to reach10.org, there's a link right on there saying like get involved or volunteer or something, and that's basically how we have all of our people who are involved now.
And I think some people have stories up there, and there's lots of blog posts and things like that. So yeah, our stories are all very similar, right? Some type of connection to pornography and addiction, and we got in touch with Savannah, and she recruited us, and so it's a work in progress. But
Savannah is the former director of the Utah Coalition Against Pornography.
Yep.
So. Any other questions?
Thank you for that question. Appreciate it. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If you have other questions, we would individually be able to answer questions. So, thank you.